Fortunately, to acquire rationality is not complicated. It simply requires knowing and working through a three-step process. First, we must become aware of what we shall call low-grade irrationality. This is a function of continued moods and feelings that we experience in life below the level of consciousness. When we plan or make decisions, we are not aware of how deeply these moods and feelings skew the thinking process. They create in our thinking pronounced biases that are so deeply ingrained in us that we see evidence of them in all cultures and all periods of history. These biases, by distorting reality, lead to the mistakes and ineffective decisions that flag our lives. Being aware of them, we can begin to counterbalance their effects. Second, we must understand the nature of what we shall call high-grade irrationality. This occurs when our emotions become inflamed, generally because of sudden pressures. As we think about anger, excitement, resentment, or suspicion, it intensifies into a reactive state. Everything we see or hear is interpreted through the lens of this emotion. We become more sensitive and more prone to other emotional reactions. Impatience and resentment can bleed into anger and deep distrust. These reactive states are what lead people to violence, to manifestations, to uncontrollable greed, or to desire to control another person. This form of irrationality is the source of more acute problems, crises, conflicts, and disastrous decisions. Understanding how this type of irrationality operates can allow us to recognize the reactive state as it is happening and pull back before we do something we regret. Third, we need to enact certain strategies and exercises that will strengthen the thinking part of the brain and give it more power in the eternal struggle with our emotions. Emotions are continually affecting our thought processes and decisions below the level of our awareness. And the most common emotion of them all is the desire for pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Our thoughts almost inevitably revolve around this desire. We simply recoil from entertaining ideas that are unpleasant or painful to us. We imagine we are looking for the truth or being realistic, when in fact we are holding on to ideas that bring a release from tension and soothe our ego, make us feel superior. This applies principle in thinking. It's the source of all our mental biases. If you believe that you are somehow immune to any of the following biases, it is a simple an example of a pleasure principle in action. Instead, it is best to search and see how they continually operate inside you, as well as learn how to identify such irrationality in others. Confirmation bias. I look at evidence and arrive at my decisions through more or less rational processes. But because of the pleasure principle and its unconscious influence, we manage to find evidence that confirms what we want to believe. This is known as confirmation bias. In the end, people want to hear their own ideas and prophecies confirmed by an expert opinion that will interpret what you say in light of what they want to hear, and if your advice runs counter to their desires, they will find some way to dismiss your opinion, your so-called expertise. The more popular the person, the more they're subject to this form of the confirmation bias. When investigating confirmation biases in the world, take a look at theories that seem a little good to be true. Conviction bias. I believe in this idea so strong, it must be true. We hold on to idea that is secretly pleasing to us, but deep inside, we might have some doubts as it is truth, and so we go extra mile to convince ourselves. Those, on the other hand, who express nuances, whose tone is more hesitant, reveal weakness and self-doubt. They're probably dying, or so we think. This bias makes us the susceptible statesmen and the demagogues, who displays a conviction as a way to convince and deceive. They know that people are hungry for entertainment, so they cloak their half-truths with dramatic effect. Appearance bias. I understand the people I deal with. I see them just as they are. We see people not as they are, but as they appear to us. And these appearances are usually misleading. First, people have trained themselves in social situations to present a front that is appropriate and that will be judged positively. They seem to be in favor of noblest causes, always presenting themselves as hardworking and conscientious. We take these mass for reality. Second, we must front the fall for the halo effect. When you see certain negative or positive qualities in a person, social awareness, intelligence, other positive or negative qualities are implied that favor us. People are good looking generally seem more trustworthy, particularly politicians. If a person is successful, we imagine they are probably ethical, conscientious, and deserving of their good fortune. This obscures the fact that many people who haven't gotten ahead have done so through less than moral actions, which they cleverly disguise from view. The group bias. My ideas are my own. I do not belong a group. I'm not a conformist. We are social animals by nature. The feeling of isolation, of difference from the group is depressing and terrifying. We experience a tremendous relief when we find others who think the same way we do. In fact, we are motivated to take up ideas and opinions because they bring us this relief. We are unnerved at this pole, and so imagine we have come to certain ideas completely on our own. Yet, few would ever admit this influence on their appearance. The blame bias. I learn from experience and mistakes. Mistakes and failures illicit, don't need to explain. We want to learn the lesson and repeat the experience, but in truth, we do not like to look too closely at what we did. Our introspection is limited. Our natural response is to blame others, circumstances, or momentary lapse of judgment. The reason for this bias is that it is often too painful to look at our mistakes. It calls into question our feelings of superiority. It pokes at our ego. Superiority bias. I'm different. I'm more rational than others, more ethical as well. Few to say this in people in conversation. It sounds arrogant. But in numerous opinion polls and studies, when asked to compare themselves with others, people generally express an variation of this. It is the equivalent of an optical illusion. We cannot see our faults and irrationalities, only those of others. Beware the inflaming factors. Low-grade emotions continually affect our thinking, and they originate from our own impulses. For instance, the desire for pleasing and comforting thoughts. High-grade emotion, however, comes at sudden moments, reaches an explosive pitch, and is generally sparked by something external, a person who gets under our skin or particular circumstances. The level of arousal is higher, and our attention is captured completely. The more we think about the emotion, the stronger it gets, which makes us focus even more on it, and so on and so forth. Our minds turn into the emotion, and everything reminds us of our anger or excitement. We become reactive. Because we are unable to bear the tension this brings, high-grade emotion generally culminates in some rash action with disastrous consequences. In the middle of such an attack, we feel possessed, as if a second limbic self has taken over. It is best to be aware of these factors so that you can stop the mind from tunneling and prevent the religion action that you will always come to regret. You should also be aware of high-grade rationality in others to either get out of the way or help bring them back to reality. Trigger points from early childhood. In early childhood, we are at our most sensitive and vulnerable. Our relationship to our parents had a much greater effect on us the further back in time we go. The same could be said for any early proper experience. These vulnerabilities and wounds remain buried deep within our minds. Sometimes we try to repress the memory of these influences if they happen to be negative, great fears, or humiliations. Sometimes, however, they are associated with positive emotions, experiences of love and attention that we continually want to relieve. Later in life, in a personal event will trigger a memory of this positive or negative experience, and with the release of powerful chemicals and hormones associated with the memory. Take, for example, young man who had a narcissist, distant mother. As an infant or a child, he experienced in her coldness as abandonment, and to be abandoned must mean he was somehow unworthy of her love. Or similarly, a new sibling on a scene causes his mother to give him much less attention, which he equally experienced as abandonment. Later in life, in a relationship, a woman may hint at disapproval of some trait or action of his, all of which is part of the healthy relationship. This will hit a trigger point. She's noticing his flaws, which he imagines precedes her abandonment of him. He feels a powerful rush of emotion, a sense of imminent betrayal. He does not see the source of this. It is beyond his control. He overreacts, accuses, withdraws, all of which led to the very thing he feared, abandonment. His reaction was to some reflection in his mind, not to the reality. This is the height of irrationality. The way to recognize this in yourself and in others is by noticing behavior that is suddenly childish in its intensity and seemingly out of character. This could center on any key emotion. It could be fear of losing control of failure. In this case, we react by withdrawing from the situation and the presence of others, like a child calling up into a ball. It suddenly is brought on by the intense fear, which conveniently causes us to have to leave the scene. It could be love, desperately searching to recreate a close parental or sibling relationship in the present, triggered by someone who vaguely reminds us of the lost paradise. It could be extreme mistrust originating from an authority figure in early childhood who disappointed or betrayed us, generally the father. This often triggers a certain rebellious attitude. The great danger here is that in misreading the present and reacting to something in the past, we create a conflict, disappointments, and a mistrust in it that only strengthen the wound. In some ways, we are programmed to repeat the early experience in the present. Our only defense is awareness. As it is happening, we cannot recognize any trigger point by the experience of emotion that are unusually primal, more uncontrollable than normal. They trigger tears, deep depression, or excessive hope. People under the spell of these emotions in a war often have a very different tone of voice and body language, as if they were physically reliving a moment from early life. In the midst of such an attack, we must struggle to detach ourselves and contemplate the possible source, the wound in early childhood, and the patterns it has locked us into. This deep understanding of ourselves and our vulnerabilities is a key step toward becoming rational.